Once there was a farmer with 2 sons. One morning he said to them,
Boys, you're old enough now to marry. But in our family, we have our own way to choose a bride.
The younger son nodded and listened respectfully, but the older one said,
You told us, Father, we must cut each down a tree and see where it points.
That's right. And walk that way till you find a sweetheart. That's how we done it, and that's how we always will.
Now the older son already knew who he wanted to marry. He also knew how to cut a tree so it fell how he wanted. So his tree fell and pointed to the farm where his sweetheart lived. The younger son, whose name was Miko, didn't have a sweetheart, but he thought he'd try his luck in the town. Well, maybe he cut the tree wrong, or maybe it had thoughts of its own, but it fell pointing to the forest.
Good job, Miko. What sweetheart you will find there? A wolf or a fox?
Never mind that. I'll find who I find.
The 2 younger men went their ways. Miko walked through the forest for hours without seeing a soul, but at last he came to a cottage deep in the woods.
I knew I'd find a sweetheart.
But when he went inside, he saw no one.
All this way for nothing?
Maybe not.
Miko looked around, but the only living thing in sight was a little mouse on a table. Standing on its hind legs, it gazed at him with large, bright eyes.
Did you say something?
Of course I did. Now why don't you tell me your name and what you came for?
Miko had never talked with the mouse, but he felt it only polite to reply.
My name is Miko, and I've come looking for a sweetheart.
Why, Miko, I'll gladly be your sweetheart.
But you're only a mouse.
That may be true, but I can still love you faithfully. Besides, even a mouse can be special. Come feel my fur.
With one finger, Miko stroked the mouse's back.
It feels just like velvet, just like the gown of a princess.
That's right, Miko.
And as he petted her, she sang to him prettily.
Miko's sweetheart I will be. What a fine young man is he. Oh, gown of velvet I do wear, like a princess fine and rare. Oh.
Well done.
Beautiful.
Miko looked into those large, bright eyes and thought she really was quite nice for a mouse. And since he found no one else anyway, he said,
All right, little mouse, you can be my sweetheart.
Oh, Miko, I promise you won't be sorry.
Miko wasn't so sure, but he just stroked her fur and smiled. When Miko got home, his brother was already there, boasting to their father.
My sweetheart has rosy cheeks and long golden hair.
Well, sounds like Miko's tree pointed a good way too.
Wait.
But now I must test both your sweethearts tomorrow. Sounds very nice. And what about yours, Miko?
Yeah, Miko, did you find the sweetheart with the nice fur coat?
Now, Miko didn't want to admit his sweetheart was a mouse, so he said,
Mine wears a velvet gown, like a princess.
His brother stopped laughing. The farmer said,
Well, sounds like Miko's tree pointed a good way too.
They started out
But
early.
now, I must test both your sweethearts. Tomorrow, you'll ask them to weave you some cloth. Then you'll bring it home to me. That's how we've done it. That's how we always will.
They started out early next morning. When Miko reached the cottage in the woods, there was the little mouse on the table, jumping up and down in happiness.
Oh, Miko, I'm so glad you're here. Is this the day of our wedding?
Miko sighed and gently stroked her fur.
Not yet, little mouse.
Why, Miko, you look so sad. What's wrong?
My father wants you to weave some cloth, but how can you do that? You're only a mouse.
That may be true, but I'm also your sweetheart. And surely Miko's sweetheart can weave. But you must be tired from your long walk. Why don't you rest while I work?
All right.
Miko lay down on a bed in the corner, and the little mouse sang to him a pretty lullaby.
Miko, sweetheart, where I be? What a fine young man is he. Oh, cloth of linen, I will weave. I'll be done when he must leave. Oh.
When the little mouse was sure that Miko was asleep, she picked up a sleigh bell on a cord and rang it. Out of mouse holes all around the room poured hundreds of mice. They all stood before the table gazing up at her.
Hurry, each of you fetch a strand of the finest flax.
The mice rushed from the cottage. Then 1, 2, 3, and back they were, each with a strand of flax. First they spun it into yarn on the spinning wheel. Whir, whir, whir. Some worked the pedal, some set the flax. Some rode around with the wheel. Then they strung the yarn on the loom and wove it into the cloth. Swish, thunk, swish, thunk, swish, thunk. Some worked the pedals, some rocked the feeder, some sailed the shuttle back and forth. At last they cut the cloth from the loom and tucked it in a nutshell.
Now off with you.
And they all scampered back to their mouse holes.
Miko, wake up, it's time to go home, and here's something for your father.
Miko sleepily took the nutshell. He didn't know why his father would want such a thing, but he said,
Thank you, little mouse.
when he got home, his brother was proudly presenting the cloth from his sweetheart. The farmer looked it over.
Strong and fairly even. Good enough for some folks like us. And where is yours, Miko?
Miko blushed and handed him the nutshell.
Look at that! Miko asked for a cloth, and his sweetheart gave him a nut!
But the farmer opened the nutshell and peered inside. Then he pinched at something and started to pull. Out came linen, fine beyond belief. It kept coming to, yard after yard after yard. Miko's brother gaped with open mouth, and Miko did too.
There can be no better weaver than Miko's sweetheart. But both your sweethearts will do just fine. Tomorrow, you'll bring them home for the wedding. That's how we've done it. That's how we always will.
When Miko arrived at the cottage next morning, the little mouse again jumped up and down.
Oh, Miko, is this the day of our wedding?
It is, little mouse.
But he sounded more glum than ever.
Why, Miko, what's wrong?
How can I bring home a mouse to marry? My brother and father and all our friends and neighbors will laugh and think I'm a fool.
They might think so indeed. But Miko, what do you think?
Miko looked at the little mouse, gazing at him so seriously with her large bright eyes. He thought about how she loved him and cared for him.
I think you're as sweet as any sweetheart could be. So let them laugh and think what they like. Today you'll be my bride.
Oh, Miko, you've made me the happiest mouse in the world.
She rang her sleigh bell, and to Miko's astonishment, a little carriage raced into the room. It was made from a nutshell and pulled by 4 black rats. A mouse coachman sat in front and a mouse footman behind.
Oh, Miko. Aren't you going to help me down?
Miko looked at her from the table and set her in the carriage. The rats took off and the carriage sped from the cottage so that Miko had to rush to catch up. While he hurried along behind her, the little mouse sang a pretty song.
Miko, sweetheart, will I be? What a fine young man is he? In a carriage I will ride when I go to be his bride. Oh!
At last they reached the farm and then the spot for the wedding on the bank of a lovely, swift-flowing stream. The guests were already there enjoying themselves, but as Miko came up, they all grew silent and stared at the little carriage. Miko's brother stood with his bride, gaping in disbelief. Miko and the little mouse went up to him.
That's the stupidest thing I ever saw!
And with one quick kick, he sent the carriage. He sent the carriage, the rats, and the mice all into the stream. Before Miko could do a thing, the current bore them away.
What have you done? You've killed my sweetheart.
Are you crazy? That was only a mouse!
She may have been a mouse, but she's also my sweetheart, and I really did love her.
He was about to swing at his brother. Then his father called out,
Miko!
all the guests were staring downstream and pointing and crying out in wonder. Miko turned and to his amazement saw 4 black horses pulling a carriage out of the stream. A coachman sat in front and a footman behind, and inside was a soaked but lovely princess in a gown of pearly velvet. The carriage rode up along the bank and stopped right before him.
Miko, aren't you going to help me down?
Miko stared blankly at a moment, and then his eyes flew wide.
Are you the little mouse?
I surely was, but no longer. A witch enchanted me, and the spell could not be broken, only by a brother who wanted to marry me and another who wanted to kill me. But, sweetheart, I need a change of clothes. I can't be wet at our wedding.
And a grand wedding it was. With Miko's bride the wonder of all, the farmer could hardly stop looking at her. Of course, Miko's brother was a bit jealous, but his own bride was really quite nice, so he couldn't feel too bad. The next day, the princess brought Miko back to her cottage. But it was a cottage no longer. It was a castle with hundreds of servants. And there they made their home happily. And if Miko and the princess had any sons,
You'll know just how they chose their brides.
And